Hello, everybody. Welcome to tonight's training session. My husband Anthony will be joining me very shortly, my business partner. And what he does, and I'll introduce him when he gets here. What he does is he asks questions to everybody. So if you haven't been to my channel yet, if it's your first time here, I am Michelle, the magic medium, and I am a conscious and intuitive channel. And I thank you so much. Just getting some water. I'm a conscious and intuitive channel. And my mission, or part of my mission, is teaching, healing, teaching and healing. Sorry, I'm just a little bit distracted. Okay, so all right. Anthony is just moving around in the background, getting the chair and all of that ready. So I facilitate healing, especially in particular soul healing. Part of my work is energy healing, but I have a team of higher dimensional beings that I work with that help me perform psychic surgery. And I also do soul healing in healing sessions as well as in compassion key sessions when we clear karmic patterns and karmic blockages with that modality. There are other modalities in which one can do that as well, or other ways. But I have found it a very effective method. And of course, I'm teaching as well. So while I'm speaking about teaching, I have a huge announcement to make. And I want to say hello to everybody first that's joining us so far. Hi, Cherise. Hi, Marlene Dragon Weaver. Hi, Melo. Hi, Wasima. Thank you so much for all of you for being here. Tonight's channeling session is going to be really, really exciting. Fayara Kashak wants to talk about the history of ancient aliens here in Southern Africa. He wants to talk to us about who the Anunnaki is, and really just clarifying a little bit, because there's a lot of information, inaccurate information about the Anunnaki. So it's almost like the whole truth isn't quite there. So he definitely wants to, he's actually just letting me know that he's going to be giving his message first. And then he will allow everybody to ask questions. So anyone can ask questions about the topics that we're discussing, or anything you want to know about Earth's history, or anything really that's involves humanity. So, and our global consciousness and our universe. So, yeah, any questions like that? So Fayara Kashak is a benevolent Anunnaki. He's a very, very old being, very ancient, and he came here a long, long, long time ago. And when the water covered the earth, when the mass extinction event happened, he, with some Khoisan, because he was located here in Southern Africa, even though things changed a little bit geographically, that's more in terms of the solar plexus of the earth, the portal of the earth. And Marlene obviously has a lot more, Marlene Dragonweaver has a lot more information about that. But essentially, he was around the solar plexus of the earth, which is the whole of South Africa, the whole of Southern Africa. So he was in near what we can think of as Table Mountain now. It might not have appeared that way then, because it was actually built. It's actually a construction, if you like, or holographic construction, if you like. And there's a very busy spaceport that's been hidden in that mountain for a very long time. Best kept secret for a very long time. So yeah, he's got a lot that he wants to share, and very willing and eager to speak to people. He's basically a representative of the Galactic Federation. And of course, the Galactic Federation is more an idea, It's more a group of people who all want peace and prosperity and the highest good for Earth and everyone involved in this project. So, the announcement I want to make. So, there's a little bit short notice, but on Thursday night, I'm having my Phoenix Magic event. And while I'm here, I'm going to do this right now. I am going to be sending out a newsletter to my subscribers. And in that newsletter is all the details about. I will send it afterwards. So I will send this newsletter directly after the channeling session to my members. If you are not a subscriber, don't worry. There is a link down below to the event. And what is this event about? This event is part of my mission. And I'm going to be having a few of them running up to the huge event that where I will be joining Marlene Dragonweaver. It's basically the new Earth 5D sync. So we are going to get synced to Gaia so that we can be on the same frequency. So it's a really, really huge event. And running up to that, the work that I'll be doing there, as well as the work in preparation for that I'll be doing in my Phoenix Magic events, is to help lay the pathway for the crystalline structure within the human bodies and connecting it with Gaia's web. And the rainbow crystal beings will be assisting me with that. I've also been in contact with, I'm just going to call them the Phoenix Collective. So it's Phoenix beings. Not exactly what we think phoenixes are, but that I'll say more about that at the event. And yes, so I'll be laying those pathways. I will also be doing a generalized karmic clearing, especially around fear and lower vibrational imprints. So it will be a collective clearing. I will not be using the compassion key. I will be using light code and other channeled methods to clear the karmic imprints around fear. So if you're at the event, if you're willing to receive, that's going to happen. And finally, I will be preparing, I will be facilitating, let's rather say, a download by your spirit guides, ancestors, and or higher self. So a specific download that is targeted at you specifically and what you need for your highest good and for this elevation. So I'm calling it a transmutation and elevation event because that's basically what it's going to be. And healing, there's healing involved. So the link for that is down below. If you're interested in that, you can click on the link below. You can register. If you're on my Source Node WhatsApp group, I will be in contact with you tomorrow morning first thing. You have got a special coupon which gives you a huge discount, a really, really huge discount. So I'll be sharing that coupon with you and it will be connected to your email address. Okay, so that's for my WhatsApp members. I will be in contact about that tomorrow morning. So don't register yet if you're on my WhatsApp group. I will send you the link, the coupon code tomorrow morning. Okay, so that's all about the event. Really looking forward to that. I am going to ask an investment, an energy exchange of $8. I'm keeping it $1 amount because this is a global thing. This is for everybody. This is not just for South Africans. This is available to everybody. So I'm just keeping $1 for now while the dollar is still there. When the dollar is no longer there, then I'll revise. But for now, just keeping it at $8, and 8 is very significant in this work, as well as you know, the date is the 8th of June. So that's on Thursday. And the event that we are going to be doing with Marlene. It's a huge, huge event. It involves a concert. It involves several collaborators, channelers. Yeah, it's a huge thing. So that's going to be happening the 8th of August. And more details will follow about that. I'll also be interviewing Marlene and posting some of those videos on YouTube to get more information about that whole big event. So, okay, without further ado, that was a lot of information. So that's everything about admin. Just remember, if this is of any value to you, and if you gain any insight and find that it resonates with you tonight, the channeling, please like and subscribe and share. Hit the notification bell so that you can be notified when there are new videos coming out and when I'll be doing lives. And you can also give a contribution towards the channel. There is a PayPal link below if you wish to do that. Okay, and here's Anthony. Yeah.
Hello, everyone.
There we go. And he'll be joining me. And yeah, been a little bit under the weather, but much better now.
Hopefully my voice lasts.
Yeah. So, okay. So without any further ado, let's get Fayara Kashak in and have your questions ready. Awesome, Melo. So am I. I'm so excited. So Marlene and I, as well as some other people, beings, have been working towards this goal for millions of years. So we've had this soul mission for a very, very long time and collaborating on this. So yeah, very exciting. Okay. Time for Fayara Kashak. Shitakura Hukui Sing Kosuku Suki Shisuki Hinkara Tatekira Tateki Sinta Soy Shitinta Kasasoyentiki Fer la Kenta Karasosokoro Hukui Sise Shin Karata Taking Pafa Heki Susu Shitekera Tateking Pafenta Kosoto Shuntokorota Beheke Sasanki Tankahi Kosungo Wingungun Yesa Kashinda Karakate. Ora conta pela quinta cata, encata que quem pensa que não aqui dizem que a hora que empata chete pa ora tata cara tata hoko oro toto hekere ka se a chete ka pera tata kuro toto hoto te a sen cara tata incapata te incalata te tope. Oh, okay. So he's just bringing in some light language first, helps me to connect with him. Okay. All right. He's reminding me that we are doing telepathic communication and not direct channeling. Thank you, Fayara. All right. So I'm going to tell you what he says. That's pretty much how it's going to work. So let me put my glasses back on. All right. And I'm just closing my eyes because it helps me focus. It's the only reason why. All right. Is this facing? Okay. Hello to everybody. Thank you so much for allowing me to be here tonight and for giving me this space to educate you about the history of Africa, the history of Southern Africa, and how it affects the global history as well. So I would like to give you a little bit of background tonight about what what transpired. Some of it may be a little bit of repetition for those that have watched some of Michelle's channelings with me before, but there will also be a whole lot of new information that I would like to share with you. So I'm going to give you a message and give you a rundown of what I feel is important for you to know at this time. And then I will give everybody an opportunity to ask questions about that or anything else you want to ask me about. My speciality there are two things I specialize in with regards to communication with you. Firstly, it is to educate you and give you the truth about Earth's history, in particular Africa and Southern Africa. And it is also to be a liaison for you to your star brothers and sisters. Some star brothers and sisters that have lived underground, right under the mountain, and in complex inner pockets in the earth that runs all the way underneath Earth's solar plexus or underneath Southern Africa. And they are ready to start connecting with you as well. They are ready to impart certain information as well as preparing humanity in their own way. Of course, not everybody's interested in the surface dwellers, but that is changing at a rapid rate. So basically, when Enki came through, Enki and Enlil came through. And as many of you know, these Anu or Anunnaki, let's rather call them Anu, because in truth, the Anunnaki is like me, who is a hybrid between the Anu and other races, in particular the seeded humans. So Enki really wanted Earth to prosper, wanted to give humanity and this Earth project the best chance of survival. And it was Enki's mission to pass on information regarding civilization, regarding organized life, regarding education and empowerment. So empowerment was very much part of it for him. But Enlil had a very different approach and a very different perspective of what humanity's role should be. Enlil was very jealous and did not agree with the fact that humanity, who started out as primitive beings, was given this chance, this elevation. So the evolution did not happen naturally. So if that is something that you still believe, the evolution of humankind did not happen in a natural way. And if you look at some of the facts of the history that was shared with you, of course, not everything was shared because a lot of the dates are wrong. You will notice that there were big gaps in the development of humanity according to evolution. So other races, like the Anu, came here to seed humanity, to help humanity. And in fact, very higher dimensional throne beings were part of that process. And the Anu were, in a way, serving that ideal of seeding humanity and teaching humans as well. And this happened over a very, very long period of time. It was not an instant thing. It was over hundreds of thousands of years. And for a long time, it was a very prosperous. There were many prosperous communities, and everybody worked alongside each other in a very positive way. But as I've said, Enlil was jealous, and he wanted to rather enslave humanity, and he did actually create some slaves as well. So he did help with the process, but with a different agenda in mind. And eventually, this caused. So it's also important to understand that part of this project and part of this realm is this duality. So even though Enlil can be seen as a dark force and Enki can be seen as a light force, essentially they both were serving a greater purpose, which was that duality. So, and that's always been a thing of this place. And as humanity is ascending, that will change, and duality will no longer be. It will be different. There will be more unity. So this separation and division that's caused by duality was part of the plan and part of the process, because it's only in this way that this experiment and this project would be a success. And the whole point of this experiment and project was to allow races and peoples from many, many different places in this universe, as well as from other universes, because in fact it was seeded by beings from other universes, very higher places, much higher places. So they had to come down, and yes, basically it was, sorry, the connection was broken slightly. Okay, just getting back. Fayara, connection was broken. Let's get it back. So as these higher dimensional beings came here from other worlds and other universes to this universe, not only did they seed the earth, they seeded other places around this universe. Some were already in existence. Some of the races that lived there were already in existence, but many actually came from elsewhere. So, for example, if you think about the Syrians and Syrian star seeds, most of those star seeds actually did not originate from this universe. They came from another universe. And so it is with the human consciousness, and as well as many animals here, and many other and insects and birds. Many of those were placed here in this environment where there could be a huge diversity, and this diversity has always been key to this project. Free will diversity, because the point of the project, with everybody having free choice, whether they wanted to have positive experiences or negative experiences, whatever each soul chose to experience here, it was about eventually getting to a point where everybody from all these different places in the multiverse could come together and learn to work together. So if you look at the Earth's history, it might seem like that is the opposite, but it's because of this duality. So the wars and negative things that have happened, plagues, sicknesses, all of those things happened for very specific reasons. Some of it was part of the experiences and the learning that each soul wanted to experience. But it was also to balance out the light that needed to come in. So a source wanted to experience the negative things as well, what we as humans consider as negative or evil, even, or dark. So source wanted to experience that as well as the light. Source wanted to experience everything. And so therefore it kept having different experiences and more souls coming from source. Because all souls, whether it's a crystal or a person or a insect or a extraterrestrial or a tree, all souls are source. Cumulatively and together and collectively, it's one soul. You could think of source as the oversoul of all. And that is why it's so important at this time for people to become aware of their God power, as it's being called. So, and that is part of this elevation. And it is time to remember some of the past, because that past has relevance to the future that is coming. Because humanity and this, let's rather say, this whole realm is ready to level up. A lot of groundwork has been put in place, a lot of preparation, millions of years of preparation have been put into this project. And now it's time for us to become unified again, to not be separate anymore. It is time for the new earth and the new consciousness. So it's important to understand that there was this duality and that there were different groups. Let's put it into if we want to put it in a very black and white way, there were two big sort of energies that has helped to shape the world as it is today. But there's also a lot that has been hidden away, a lot of facts and information, like the true reason behind the wars. Of course, some of that information is starting to come out, and there's been a lot more revelation around why the wars on Earth happened. And of course, there were wars in this galaxy and in this universe specifically that happened as well, and in the solar system even. For example, the Orion Wars. And yes, so many of us, the Anu, came from other universes and other galaxies through the portal of Sirius, in Sirius. So, and Orion, that is why Orion's belt is seen everywhere, because those three stars in Orion's belt really are key centers for different races and peoples and beings to jump to, depending on where they're coming from. And of course, even the other stars in that system, that whole place is really full of portals, specifically from other places, other realms, and other galaxies, other worlds. So that is why it's so central, and why you can see all over the Earth evidence of a connection with Sirius and Orion. Okay, I'm just listening. What I'd also like you to know is that Enlil was the one, as well as his followers, were the ones who made the deal with the devil, so to speak. That Draconis being that has been in control of the reptilian races and that has now left this place. So a lot of that suffering and oppression that has happened over a long period of time was part of the balance that needed to happen of this duality. But that is where a lot of the oppression came from, was from those powers that control this place. But of course, now they have left. They're no longer here. And the people that are still in control that wanted power, it's dissipating. Some have left this place and gone to other worlds. Some have passed on. And of course, they continue in spirit or in 5D. But it is now time for the forces of light, if you want to look at it that way, to lead and to bring this consciousness into unity and into the next, into the evolution of this whole place. And I want to encourage you to really ask questions that would help you understand, or anything that has sparked an interest in you about this history, anything that you want to get information on. Whatever it is that resonated with you, or that you maybe have questions coming up, please feel free now to ask any questions that you would like to ask.
Thank you. We do have some questions from people online. So
Thank
the
you.
first one is from Marlene. She asks, did the throne being of Earth, Gaia, ask for the Anu to help with the development of humanity?
That is correct. You've got that exactly correct. Do you want more detail about that?
If you could elaborate a bit, that would be great.
So all of this will be revealed in much more detail in the next 2 months. But yes, there are several throne beings that were part in designing this project. And it was, you could say, they conscripted, enlisted, contracted. There is no English word or there is no real word to describe exactly what it is, but a contract would probably be the closest thing. So they contracted the Anu to do this work, yes. And some also incarnated as Anu or as other beings, and sometimes as humans. So some of these throne beings have been incarnating, and sometimes repeatedly incarnating, to make sure the project's running smoothly. And they did this in a very clever way. They, with the help of their twin flames. Now, if you are not clear on what a twin flame is, a twin flame, if you have a twin flame, your twin flame is literally the other half of your soul. So half of the throne beings incarnated into human bodies, at first into Anu, came in as Anu, as well as sometimes other races, but mainly with the Anu or the Anunnaki. And I'm just saying Anunnaki because many people are not clear about the Anu and don't have knowledge about that. The Anunnaki actually comes from the Anu. So they use the Anu specifically, very specifically, to execute certain tasks, and some even incarnated as those beings. Some also incarnated as other types of beings. And then eventually many of these beings incarnated as well. So as a whole soul, so we were talking about the twin flames, as a whole soul, They incarnated at that time in the beginning of all of this, the beginning of the project, the beginning of the seed of humanity. They incarnated as Anu, as a whole soul. And when they decided they needed to come back as humans to check on the timelines and to check on the various aspects of the project, so each of those throne beings had a specific task. And of course, their tasks overlapped somewhat, but had a specific task in what they had to, in what they were in control of, and what they were in charge of, and checking that the blueprints and designs were executed properly. And when it wasn't executed properly, to help with the timelines. So it had to be anchored into the 3D timeline for the experience. But when they came in as humans, they split their souls so that one part could incarnate as humans and the other part could stay in spirit, so to speak, in the higher dimensions. Therefore, always having a link between the physical world in this realm, this 3D experience, as well as understanding the human experience by being humans. So not always aware of what they were here to do, but eventually figuring it out, just as many other starseeds. And those that were in spirit could assist them and guide them, actually as spirit guides. They're twin flames that were in spirit and still are. So I hope that gives you more insight into that and the Anu's role.
Thank you. Marlene does have some follow-up questions. I think the next question is a two-part question. I think you've already answered the first one. It goes something like this. Are there other throne beings involved in the Earth project? So you've answered that there were a specific amount.
Yeah, and there's different types of throne beings. I think most people think of throne beings as angels, but angels are not the only group of throne beings. So Marlene would know that dragons are another type of throne being. Okay, so a higher dimensional dragon, a very specific type of throne dragon, and the same with the throne angels. Of course, you get other kinds of angels as well.
Okay, so the second part of that question is, where are they based? The ones that were involved.
So, are we talking about the humans?
The throne beings involved in the Earth project.
Okay. So, as I've said, some of them are in spirit or in 5D. Some of them are actually have been in higher dimensions, but been able to come down to 5D so that those that are on 3D can connect with them in 5D. So the ones that are in 3D, many of them are living out human existences, human lives, just like any other human. They still have to worry about bills and all of those things. They get sick just like everybody else, but came here with specific tasks. So they are actually, there's a number of them on each continent or near each of the chakras in particular. And so some are, for example, the 12 dragons that are working with Tiamut, the earth dragon. They are guarding the ley lines, as people know it, and are in charge of those ley lines in terms of holding the tectonic plates in place, as well as other functions. So that is one example. So they're all over the globe, and the other beings that are involved, the other throne beings, are dispersed all over the globe in particular points. It's not always with the earth chakras, but very important portals and very important points around the globe. I hope that makes sense.
Thank you. And then another question from Marlene.
But I think a better way to say points is nodes. He just said to me nodes, call it nodes. It's very specific nodes, energy nodes. Yeah.
Okay, another one from Marlene. So Marlene asks, are these Anu part of what is otherwise known as blueprinters? Can you talk more about the various blueprinters, please?
Okay. I do feel that my understanding of blueprinters is still very new. So I'm hoping Fayara Kashak could give an explanation with my limited knowledge. Okay, so let's... Okay, so the question is, are the Anu all blueprinters? That's kind of the first thing we want to know. Are they all blueprinters or some of them?
The Anu that came
initially,
yes. Are they known as blueprinters? And then we just need to want to talk a bit more about the various blueprinters.
Okay, so not all the Anu are blueprinters. Some of the throne beings are blueprinters that are in human form. And of course, as I said, some of those incarnated as Anu originally. So it's a specific group. And with them came other Anu as well as other races that served their goals. So some of the Anu that were blueprinters, they saw themselves or how the ancient people with the ancient memories. So if you speak to the Aboriginal peoples of the earth, some of them will have memories about the people that came from the stars, who were the Anu. And they called them gods. But in fact, it was more like high priests and high priestesses in a way. But even that isn't exactly accurate. That's not really, but it doesn't really translate exactly. But pretty much they were in leadership positions. That's probably the best way to put it. But much more than a political leader or just a spiritual leader. It's kind of it's almost like parents. They really do see themselves as parents in many ways. Of course, they each, depending on their task and their mission, would be the parent of something specific, if that makes sense. Please let me know if that does not make sense. So, for example, if one of them were in charge of humanity itself and humanity's well-being, then they would feel like or see themselves as a kind of guardian and parent of humanity. And of course, there's always in each of those cases, there's something to balance out the energy. There's always a balance to the energy because it has to be in this place of duality. But as I said, some of the Anu came also as very strong, highly intellectual beings, or at least they would have appeared to the humans as the same beings. But in fact, they were not exactly the same beings, but they were here to serve. And of course, there were other races that also served the Anus or the blueprinters' missions. Okay, so I'm trying to kind of put this all together. All right. Okay, different types of blueprinters. Okay, so because of my limit in understanding or my limited knowledge about the types of blueprints, because I have looked at it and I know there's different kinds of blueprinters, but I don't remember what they are. Fayara Kashak will explain it not in the terms that people might see online, but just sort of explaining what each of the groups does without giving that group a name. Okay, so that's how he's going to explain it because of my limited knowledge. All right. All right, so the change blueprinters, and this term is known by those people that study blueprinters. The change blueprinters has come here to put in changes as needed. So the first initial change that they wanted to make was to change the way that to change the experiences of source to such a degree that source could experience everything in all different facets of life. And it was also part of their mission to be in flow and change as things came up, because even though source is all and therefore knows all, because it's expanding and there's new consciousnesses that arise out of source and it keeps expanding in that way, the multiverse is infinite, right? So because of not always knowing, even though it knows what the different experiences, what effects that would have, sometimes the timelines and grids and other tools and other structures, let's rather call it structures, that were put into place had to have changes made to it. So each throne being or blueprinter would have a specific job. So this is especially with those that are involved with the grids and the matrices. Yeah. And then there are blueprinters that was in charge of designing the experiment from the ground up. So those blueprinters would be similar to the grid workers, because the ones that did the grids, that's directly involved with the matrices as well. So the grid, so the change, the ones that the change blueprinters would be monitoring the changes and affecting the changes. The ones that are in charge of the grids and designed the grids and implemented the grids are involved and work with the change blueprinters. So the change blueprinters would be, I guess, the ones that analyze the system and see what's going on in the system and then report to the grid blueprinters. So the grid blueprinters, you can kind of think of them as the engineers. So they would then go and create new code. And it's really a programming kind of language is the best way to describe it, because all the different light codes and things is very similar to how programming works. It's just much more higher frequential. It's a much higher frequency and a very different thing to the coding that we know of as programming. But it's the easiest way or the easiest analogy to explain to you how that works. So the ones in charge of the grids were also the ones that were working with universal mathematics, as well as sacred geometry and all of that. Then there were those that, so some things overlap. Then there are those that were in charge of portals. So, and creating portals and opening them, closing them, adjusting them, all those kinds of things. So they are connected to the change blueprinters as well. But yes, their main purpose is to work with the portals. And sometimes that, like I said, it overlaps. Then there are the blueprinters that are in charge of different beings. So some blueprinters, so for example, those that seeded other worlds within this universe would be in charge of different groups of races and different peoples. And in fact, some of the blueprinters are directly responsible for how humanity came about. So they would check on that and humanity's progress and humanity's, even their bodies, their physical bodies, all of that. Then there are those that are also working with higher dimensional beings that are also on this plane or in this earth, the 5D beings, so the 5D matrix. So they would work with those beings. And again, those relate to each other in many ways. And I get the sense from Fayara that there are more types of blueprinters, but yeah, I'm having a little bit of difficulty with those that I have not worked with myself, so I'm not very clear on exactly what they do. I also get the sense that there are blueprinters that had to be in control of maintaining the balance. So that's something else that's coming up. So there are, let's put it this way, there are the designers. That's one type of blueprinter. They are the engineers, so the one that implement the designs. They are the changers or change makers, if you like, and they would monitor the system and watch the fluctuations and adjust what needs to be adjusted accordingly, and they would work with others when needed. So those are the three sort of main categories, but all of those categories, those three main categories, I think there's a fourth one that I'm missing out on, but those three, those main categories had sort of subcategories, if that makes sense. So the designers, there would be some that's in charge of beings, some that's in charge of planets, some that's in charge of the integration between those, some that's in charge of the portals. So that's kind of how I'm understanding it. I'm kind of seeing sort of like almost like a mind map that I'm being shown. But yeah, I do realize some of the information is missing. Having a little bit of difficulty with some of the information. Definitely seeing something about stars as well. And also showing me that there's bigger portals and smaller portals and different kinds of portals. Yeah, it's very complicated. Sure. Okay.
We've got some questions from Melo to get on maybe less complicated.
Fantastic. Thank you, Melo. Okay.
Well, we'll see how less complicated it is. Okay.
It's very technical for me.
Yeah.
Give me the creative stuff, please.
So Melo's asking, I'd like to know how the Africans were protected during the flood. Was it underground, space ark, or something else?
Yes. Okay, so I think this came through in the channeling that Fayara, when I was speaking to Fayara Kashak, was it in I think March or something like that? The link to all the channeling sessions that I've had with Fayara Kashak is down below. So you can go and check that out. Okay, so basically, I'm not just going to go on memory. I'm going to actually listen to what he's going to say. So as I've shared, so I'm now speaking on behalf of Fayara. As I've said before with regards to the Khoi Sun, and the Khoi Sun, of course, is a name that was later given to the later, the people after the flood. the tribes that formed after the flood. But in fact, they were known by different names. And they were the ancient humans. So all the Aboriginal, so that was the Khoisan specifically. So all the Aboriginal groups, so their memories are still alive in the Aboriginal groups all over the earth, and their wisdom is there. Many have tried to oppress them, especially in Africa. It's been especially harsh to such a degree that they use storytelling to hide the information and truth and wisdom inside the stories, just to make it sound like interesting African stories instead of truths. So a lot of that has been lost, but in Africa in particular, that knowledge is still there within the people, even within the people's DNA. So yeah, that history is there. The memory of it's there. It's the datas in the water. That's what he's saying. Okay, so with those Aboriginal groups, they all pertain knowledge, common knowledge that everybody, that all of them have in common. Let's rather say that all of them, all of their origin stories corroborate and have overlaps, even though none of them were connected to each other in any way, right? So all of them, many of them were protected, and that's why they're still here today, and why they still have that wisdom of what happened and the floods and everything. They actually have that knowledge. So, and that's also why the oppression of those who were in charge happened specifically around the Aboriginal peoples all over the world. If you think about the Australian Aborigines, the Native Americans, the Khoisan, the Romanian Gypsy type people, there's many more cultures, which I will not mention here now. That knowledge is there. If you look for it, you will find it. So in terms of Africa, so most of the Aboriginal groups were protected, and this includes the African groups as well, were protected by these bubbles. I can't remember I don't know the word that he used earlier, but it's that. What was the word that he used in the question?
Space arc.
Space arc. Yes, that's a very good description for these bubbles, because I called it a bubble because I visually see it looks like a bubble. And it's almost like it's not exactly a vacuum, because there's breathable air and oxygen and light and everything within these, space arcs. So some of them were placed there and had everything that they needed, and formed a sort of a collective or a unity. And when the waters receded and they were released from that, so these were quite big areas, fairly big areas. Some of those space arcs were positioned over inner Earth entrances. So for some, they just had the space arc territory, if you like, for lack of a better word. For some, they had the space arcs with the inner Earth tunnels, and some went underground because there was a safe place where they could go to. So they would have been led by, so for example, Fayara Kashak led the natives here in Southern Africa, led a huge group of them, a significant group, underground through the tunnels. He knew where to go. He knew where to take them. And many of those lived for a much longer time than the surface dwellers lived. So, I'm getting a sense that some of those, they lived very, very long, a very long time. They lived so it's like some of the inner pockets are not influenced by the inverted matrix, the imposed matrix at all. and therefore they lived their normal, natural, long human lives. So if you think about biblical times, how it was often described, people lived 900 years, 1,000 years. Actually, humanity is meant to live even longer than that, much longer than 900 or 1,000 years. So, and we are coming back to that, where people's lives are getting longer. And as we go into 5D, we'll live out our natural lives much longer. So yes, it kind of depended on where they were, location-wise, what was nearest to them. Most of them did have some warning. But for those that didn't quite get the message, because that happens sometimes, they were protected. Yeah, I hope that makes sense.
Thank you. Okay, so the next one, I'm just going to read what he wrote. I don't quite understand. Maybe we can figure this out ourselves. It says, does the personal help we receive the ETs outside
from the ETs
help? Yeah, sorry. Does the personal help we receive? Does the personal help we receive from the ETs outside our soul groups infringe on our soul plan for life?
Not always. So first and foremost, I would like to remind you that you have free choice here. As you're all aware, free choice is part of this experiment. It had to be part of this experiment, and everybody has to give consent. Sometimes those vows are carried over generations. So that is where the karmic imprints can be released. Some of the programming can be removed because it's a generational vow that can be broken. So those ETs that are outside of your soul group, many of them are higher vibrational, higher density beings that are communicating with you and are in fact part of that Galactic Federation idea or ideology. And so many of them want to help, has the highest good of humanity in mind, just as with any spirit guide. Those within your soul group, or rather within your oversoul, would be the more reliable personal guides. So if you think of each person has at least 2 guides that are assigned to them their whole lives, their personal guides. Some have got more than that. It kind of depends on each individual and how much sort of help they needed, for example, or requested before they came into this incarnation. So those within their oversoul and within their soul group will always be there, or is there, and is obviously much more reliable and know them better. Those that are outside of that group can give information to the guides, to your personal guides, but can also directly speak to you if you're ready or if you're willing, and can help you. But of course, it is important to understand that not all guides that represent themselves as guides to you are necessarily coming from a place of the highest good of all. So therefore, it is incredibly important to practice discernment. Discernment is key. So I hope that answers your question. Either way, whoever you are communicating with, you should always use your intuition, trust your intuition. If something feels a little bit off or a little bit weird, ask why. And you can always ask the question, are you from the light? Because it's only those higher dimensional beings that are connected to the light. It doesn't matter what type of being they are. What matters is whether they're in the light. So they are going to always have the highest good in mind, for humanity, for the universe, for the infinite universe. So you have to trust your own judgment in that. But of course, like the bottom line is that those higher frequency beings can be of use and can help you. And they come in, they might not be with you your whole life, but might come in just for a certain portion that you need to learn. And they quite often will work with your personal guides as well. So sometimes you just don't have only one being guiding you in a specific experience and lessons that you need to learn. But yeah, you'll have different beings sometimes teaching you different aspects of that lesson and of those experiences.
All right, so we've got 2 questions left, one from Mela, one from Marlene. So the last one from Mela. Which ET races seeded the African people? Who are the off-world Africans?
So the Anu seeded the Africans. The majority of the Africans were from the Anus. In fact, the Anu came to Africa first. They also went to the heart chakra area. So, like the islands, the Pacific Islands. I think Hawaii is also a specific island. As far as I know, the heart chakra of the earth is in Hawaii. Please, Marlene, help me if I'm incorrect there. Marlene knows more about the chakras. Okay, but anyway, let me listen to what Fayara is saying. What was the question?
Just wanted to know who seeded the African
people
yes. And who
the
are
Anu.
off-world Africans.
Okay, so the Anu seeded most of them. Most of the people that were created were actually created for the positive side of the experiment, if you like, the lighter side, but there were also those that were created as slaves, and that was more on Enlil's side. He kind of did it under the radar because he broke the rules, right? The rules were don't interfere to a certain extent. So the creation was one thing, but then to let the experiment be a success, people needed to practice their free will and free choice and had to give consent. But what Enlil and his followers did, as well as those that he was in, let's call it collaboration with, working with, pretended to use the same methods and to have the same agenda, but actually they had their own hidden agenda, which was to ultimately control and enslave the human race. So therefore, they did create slaves by placing certain implants upon them so that they couldn't remember who they were. And those implants spread eventually through the world domination that happened through various ways, which was through religion, through medicine, through schooling, and various other through the food that people ate. So they used various different industries, and it's also the system of control of this capitalist sort of idea, and that's all part of what they did to then eventually enslave all of humanity. But they created those first slaves so that they could program them in a certain way and spread that programming and to use them for their own gains. And that's why Africa was also why so much suffering has happened here. Sure, suffering has happened all over the globe, but here in Africa particularly, we're looking at mass starvation, huge wars, constant fighting among some of the tribes, really a lot of separation between tribes instead of unity, very warlike. So yes, a lot of those aspects came through. I just want to hear if there's other races that also seeded the Africans, because yes, I'm getting that there are other races. So I'm getting serious, but what I'm understanding from that, as I said, that's a portal. So all the races that came through those portals, or beings that came through those portals, seeded, had a huge influence in Africa. Some of them went elsewhere in the world, but here in Africa specifically. So it's those. So some of the races. What are the bigger races? Fayara. What are the bigger races? So the Anu and then the Anunnaki were created, or born, let's say, and then. Okay, I'm sorry. I see. He also wants me to explain that the Anu and the Anunnaki were often portrayed as having white skin or light skin, but this also wasn't always the case. So there's a lot of misinformation about that. So Fayara Kashak, for example, if you look at him, he's almost pitch black. His skin is super dark. And he's really tall. He's really, really tall. Yeah, I'm sorry. I think there's a gap in my knowledge regarding the different races, because I'm getting that there's a number of races, but that they're not necessarily as well known by humanity. So it's not really the Pleiadians. It's not the sort of Norwegian looking ones. I forget what they're called. The Anu were absolutely the main ones. I'm getting visual information. And there's a connection between the Greys and the Anu, which is interesting, which is a question that I want us to explore. Okay. I'm getting a bit of a blank spot there, and I'm almost wondering if we're not supposed to know, because I'm trying to get the information, but there seems to be a bit of a block there. There are more races involved, but I think even they were orchestrated by the Anu, so perhaps that's why. So the Atlantean civilization, some of the beings from Atlantis also had yes, of course they did. And it wasn't only in Egypt. I think that's the other important thing that he wants to bring through. It wasn't only in Egypt. There were other sites all across that ley line that goes from the top to the bottom of Africa. There were several civilizations that were actually started. And some of them appear younger. So with other words, the archaeologists that have found certain sites would have said that the information that their analysis, scientific analysis, placed that at a much more recent time than many of those were. Some of those were actually much older. So the Zimbabwean one, ancient Zimbabwe. Adam's calendar There's a lot that's been hidden there. I mean, it's in plain sight. It's one of the places that's the least known. Everybody knows about the pyramids and all the other ancient sites across the world, but Adam's calendar is so little known about. But it was a huge civilization there, and of course, some were part of Africa or considered part of Africa, but now underwater. So certain islands, some of it was actually part of the mainland, but it sunk. So something about it that changing, the shape of the continent changed actually. Yeah. All I can tell you is it's very complicated. There's a lot of detail here, and we could probably spend a whole session just picking that out and getting that information. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of information going forward, Melo.
Okay, so Marlene says that the heart chakra is in Glastonbury, England.
Okay, thank you for that.
And then her question about the greys are the greys monitors of some of the experiments of the blueprinters here on Earth?
Monitors. So yes, that is correct. And some of the greys are also, you can think of them as devices. They're not robots as people know robots, because they also house the souls. They house the actual souls of some of the higher frequency beings like the Anu. In fact, they are the Anu's creatures. And yes, the blueprinters have used them. But of course, they do not always behave in a way that is natural to humans. So they have freaked out a lot of humans. So Fayara is saying they've scared a lot of humans and actually traumatized a lot of humans, not because they meant to, but just because they were collecting data, and that's kind of their function. So some of them are monitors. Yeah, so collecting samples, not just to create hybrids and things like that, as the popular culture goes, but to see what's happening within the DNA. They also actually, some of them actually take samples of geological sites. Some of them actually go into inner Earth. That's new information for me. To monitor some beings, but of course they're more well known there and accepted there in some of those pockets, not on all the pockets, but in some of those inner Earth civilizations. Yeah, but they're basically used almost like remote controlled bodies. And of course, because the Anu had an influence, it's very important to also understand, he's just letting me know that some of the greys seem to have negative ideas, and that is because they were under the control of Enlil, or that faction. And of course, many of them were under Enlil, Enki. So there were greys on both sides, because they, from the same people, they had the same technology and the same knowledge. So they could use. So therefore, what people consider as the greys is a very incomplete picture, because they're not a race just on their own, and they're not just robots used by the reptilians. They were used by the reptilians, of course, as well, those that were connected with Enlil. But they're actually, in some ways, tools. But of course, they have consciousness. They have consciousness when those that are connected with that specific being, almost like some people are connected to their spaceships through their DNA, through their spacecraft. They would be connected to their body with their DNA in there, even though the grey has no resemblance whatsoever to the true body of that being. I hope that makes sense.
Thank you. And then just one last question. Was Africa seeded before or after Atlantis?
That's a very good question. Some of the first people who settled on Africa were from Atlantis, but many were seeded after Atlantis. So some of the original people from Atlantis did also come to Africa. And you'll see, even though, from the Western world's perspective, I suppose a lot of people would think Africans look sort of similar, but you would see that Africans vary greatly, not just within tribes, but across Africa and different parts of Africa, in how they look, act culturally. There's a lot of cultures in Africa, a lot of different things. So certain cultures were from those original Atlanteans, which would include the Anu's DNA. And of course, as the Atlantean idea was there for a very, very long time, there were those that sort of fled to different areas in the world, and one of those groups went to Africa. 12 groups, in fact, I think it is, where one of those groups went to Africa. And those groups, and then more from outside, more extraterrestrial races also came to bring their own DNA, because during the Atlantis experiment, there were a few extraterrestrial races that were involved in that initial experiment of Atlantis, because first there was Mu, and Lemuria was a very peaceful place of unity. It was more a 5D society, and then more races came in and wanted to experience things differently, and that's when Atlantis came about. But of course, some problems arose from that. And then when that went, let's say, pear-shaped, when that experiment came into some problems, and they kind of split up and went into different places. Of course, some of them left completely, but some went into different parts of the world. More races became interested. More outsiders became interested in this experiment, because it was essentially free to all who wanted to be part of the experiment, but they had to sign certain contracts and agreements as to what they would experience here, or what they're allowed to do here, and so on. So yes, more races, or more manipulation, if you like, more experiments were conducted to create more of the people after Atlantis, after the flood, after the second flood.
Okay, so I think the question why she asked this, she says, so the ancient Africa, Petranium, was that before or after?
Okay. Before. Wait, I'm getting sorry, Marlene. I'm remembering my own lifetime. When I came to what looks like Africa today, in the desert. And I'm just trying to understand what I'm seeing. Before. Yeah. I'm getting from him before. Yeah.
Pre-Lemuria?
Pre-Lemuria. No. No. It was more part of the Atlantis experiment. Lemuria. Pre-Lemuria, no. Lemuria, yes. Atlantis experiment, yes. Pre-Lemuria, no. Not for Africa. I just want to know if the Africans are the oldest, because that's always been my belief, especially the Khoisan, or what I've understood from Fayara Kashak before was that the Khoisan were the first people, the first Aboriginals, the original Aboriginals. I just want to make sure or get clarity around that myself, Fayara. Okay, so the Khoisan people were the original first people. And that was pre-Lemuria. But I'm trying to understand, did they come from Petronium? Okay, so what I'm understanding is that they came via Petronium, the Khoisan specifically, but that they weren't from Petronium. So that's interesting. And you're coming from a very different place. So that's pre-Lemurian. So that's why the answer was no to Petronium, because they're actually not from Petronium, but they did come via Petronium. Yes, there's a via. And then after Lemuria, some of the others came. So it was a different, wow. Every time I think I now understand the puzzle piece, there's more things coming in. Do you have any questions, Anthony, or anyone else?
No, we've gone quite over.
Oh wow! It's 9:00 already. My goodness.
Yeah, so there's one from Marlene there.
Okay, you'll ask it.
So she's saying, I thought the Aborigines of Australia was the first, or are they related to the Khoisan?
There is a loose relation. That's how Fayara is saying it. I don't understand what he means by that. There's a loose relation. So the Aborigines from Australia came around the same time, a similar time period. And they came from a different place via Petronium. Not the same place as the Khoisan. But they related in that they both wanted to be part of the experiment, or came to seed those first people of the experiment. And okay, so the Khoisan came before the Aboriginals. I'm getting just before them, just before the Australian Aboriginals. So I think that differs a bit from some of the information that other people have brought through. So that baffles me a little bit. But please do understand, when I'm speaking about the Khoisan here, we are talking about the original natives of these parts, not the Khoisan that came from not the Khoisan that changed, if I can put it that way. Not the descendants from after the flood, because the descendants after the flood were manipulated. Their DNA was manipulated somewhat. Not after the flood. Yes. So the original people. So it's the Khoisan are their descendants. but originally they weren't what they are to what they became, if that makes sense. In fact, I'm getting a picture of them. This is weird. The skins looked slightly grayer, and some of them had a sort of bluish tinge, if you like, and some had a sort of grayish tinge originally. And as they spent more time and as the earth changed, the atmosphere and the sun, and as the conditions became different for life here on earth and for the diversity, the skin colors also started changing, becoming warmer tones. And also the manipulation, the added DNA that was added started changing those skin tones. So some of those grayish colors actually remind me a little bit of the grays. That's not the same. I get that the grays DNA, the suits that they use, if you want to call it suits of the bodies, actually has some dolphin DNA in it. So that's interesting. It's got dolphin DNA, reptilian DNA, not good or bad reptilian, just reptilian DNA. And those are just the sort of bodies. They're just devices, really. So some of the organic material. So that's interesting. Wow. So much information. I can't believe that it's 9 o'clock. It felt like I just started like 40 minutes. It feels like we've been here 40 minutes. That's what it feels like to me. Anthony says no. He's exhausted. He's had to listen to me go and ah. Okay. So thank you very much, Marlene and Melo, especially for asking all these amazing questions. Thank you for everybody that also stayed and learned. And I hope, it gives you some more insight into our true history. And I think there's a lot more to it. And Fayara says he's here to teach, so he will be back. But it's important at this time that people start realizing, especially people that are here in Africa now, that they start understanding what a powerful and important place this is in terms of the DNA of the people, as well as the solar plexus of the earth. Yeah, hope that makes sense. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Fayara. Thanks for talking to us. And thank you, Anthony, for being so patient and asking the questions.
Absolutely.
And thank you, everybody, for coming and co-creating here, and looking forward to doing this with you again next week. And don't forget to look at the links down below for what you'd be most interested in. Lots of love to all of you.
Bye.
Bye. Yes, we should talk about Adam's calendar in the future, Marlene. I agree. Thank you so much, everybody. Bye. Have an awesome night. Sleep well. Love and light to you all.